Okay, here we go.
Hello.
Hi, Francesco. Hi, Robin. Welcome to the first episode of the Bitfluencers Bitcoin podcast. Robin, we are very happy to have you as a first guest.
Thank you so much for hosting me. I'm looking forward to this. Will be fun. You were my first guest on my podcast. Now I'm your first guest on your podcast. It's amazing.
I was saying the same. It sounds poetic. I was the first in your podcast, and you're now the first. So giving back the
it's a weird situation here. We are interviewing the interviewer, so things get mixed up. But we're gonna make it, and also it's a great chance to learn and to merge all of the knowledge, all of the dozens of people we have talked with across the last year at least. And so many pieces of knowledge can stem from this conversation. Hopefully.
I'm looking forward to it. Will be fun.
Okay. Great. I think we can start with the obvious question for this week. How does it feel, Bitcoin 100K?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's like those days where even your girlfriend asks you what the Bitcoin price now is, and like your little cousin is now having some Bitcoin stack. So I really feel that retail is slowly waking up. Maybe that's just because I scream in my family Bitcoin too much. That maybe just a personal thing. But I think 100K. And then, especially if we stay above that line a little bit, if we can manage to stay above 100K, maybe go to 150K, maybe even like to 200K in the first half of next year, that would really wake up a lot of people, because a lot of people still remember those days where we were at like 16K, like not that long ago, and now like maybe 160K. That's like a 10x in not a long amount of time. So I think that is a very unique window of time that we are currently in. The next like 5 to 7 years is extremely interesting. That's why I also committed to my podcast once a day, because I was like, that's the biggest opportunity that I have to contribute to the biggest financial revolution ever. And I just want to be deeply involved in that and just drive to all the conferences, make the podcasts, and do whatever I can to integrate myself as deeply as possible in that community. And obviously it feels good. It's always interesting because like you bought Bitcoin. I think my first ever Bitcoin I bought around like $6,000-7,000, and seeing it now over 10xing is just like an incredible feeling. But you've seen it rising up and down, so it doesn't really change anything. You're like, oh, it's 100K. I'm still doing the podcast, so like nothing really changed in my life. I'm not selling any Bitcoin. I'm not doing anything fancy. I cannot issue $42 billion like Saylor to buy more Bitcoin. So I'm just keep stacking, being humble, and doing my podcast every day.
Great to hear.
You mentioned a very important point where we can start from the fact that you are not affected by the fluctuations, but also you are pretty young. You are 26 years old, if I'm not wrong. So that's very good. But we were thinking. What do you experience as a person of your age? What can you see in other people of your age, the Generation X, I think it's called? What's the biggest hurdle, obstacle for them to get in touch with this technology, with this investment, digital goal, whatever, however you want to call it? What are the obstacles and how can do you think how quick this generation will catch up with the Bitcoin, if they will do in this cycle, on the next cycle? What's your idea on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the generation Z, the Zoomers that I'm in. It's like from 12 to 27 years old. So I'm on the upper side. People usually think that I'm a millennial, but I'm actually the Zoomer generation, which is currently from 1997 to 2012, if I'm not completely wrong. Please don't quote me on that, but something around those lines. So that's kind of my generation right now. And it's interesting because there's a lot of difference if you're 12 versus like 26, obviously. So putting that generation into one basket is kind of doing a misservice right now. But if we look maybe at the first half of Generation C, maybe from like 12 to let's say 18, they are completely TikTokified. They are completely in this short attention span, YouTube Shorts. I see it. I have a podcast that has only 1 hour long, sometimes 2 hours long, sometimes like 2.5 hour long podcasts. And I have 3 times as many people above 65 than under 25. So I have only 2% of my audience. Of all my audience is younger than me, and 98% of my audience is older than me. My average age is, I think, like 50 years, 47, 48, something along those lines. So obviously, the Zoomers don't get Bitcoin as good as the millennials and the Gen Xers and even the boomers. I think even the boomers get Bitcoin better than the Zoomers, the Gen Z get, because they're just too young to ask important questions like what is money. I had Samantha on. She's 13 years old. She's a Gen Z. She's almost under Gen Z. So she actually gets Bitcoin, but only because her father was so influential, and her father is a real Bitcoiner and already lives on a Bitcoin standard and pays everything in Bitcoin and gets paid in Bitcoin. So obviously for her, she growing up, it was normal for her. She was like, yeah, like what is there other to do in Bitcoin? And then she grew up and was like, oh, there's also a fiat thing. She didn't even knew that there was a fiat. She didn't even knew that there was euros. Except of those cases, most 15, 14-year-old girls or boys, they don't ask what money is. They have pocket money from their parents. If they want something, they say, hey, mom, I want that. So in that world, you don't have, as Saylor would say, a need to know about Bitcoin. You don't have like, oh, something, I need Bitcoin for that. And when we go to the millennials, they really have a really big need to know about Bitcoin. They really have a huge problem financially. They're not like the boomers who bought a house for $2 and now it's worth like 2 million. So they don't have that thing, and they have the luxury of seeing Bitcoin growing up. And for the millennials, Bitcoin is the huge possibility, and so they get it way quicker, and that's why millennials, I think, is also the biggest cohort of people inside of Bitcoin. But the Zoomers, we just need more role models, younger role models. I feel like I'm one of the youngest in Bitcoin. I thought I'm very old with my 26 years, but then you go to Bitcoin conference and you're like, everyone is 90% of me are older. So we need 18-year-old making TikTok videos 30 seconds long that explain Bitcoin. I really like what Bitcoin Chick is doing. She's doing TikTok videos. I think Amy Edberg, I think is her real name, something like that. She's doing an amazing job. And there are some other people, the Gen Z guy he does on YouTube. I don't even know his real name. He's just Gen Z on YouTube. If you want to look it up, he's doing an amazing job doing like short videos and like YouTube videos, especially also for his generation. We need those people to put Bitcoin onto the plate, because I talked with Arv about that. What does a person need to get orange pilled? And we kind of got to 3 things. He needs a need to know about Bitcoin. He needs a thing that he really has a pain point or something like that. He needs the capabilities to understand Bitcoin. So a 10-year-old maybe don't even has the capability. Yeah, it's not directed for everyone. And you need an inspirer. We all had that 1-2 guys that we looked up to in our orange pilling journey. For me, it was Saylor. I was really orange pilled by Saylor, Anthony Pompliano, and Seyr. Those were the kind of the 3 guys that I looked in 2020 up to a lot. And there are not too many inspirers that are 18 years old and could inspire the new generation.
Okay. I think I will add also for the new joiners, they need also the price going up to join Bitcoin. Most of them join it when the price goes up. People say 2013, 17, 20 or 21. You don't have new joiners in 2018, for example, or very few.
100%. I always count that in the pain point, but it's actually this own thing, because you have to have the pain, the time maybe also, like you need the time to actually research the whole thing, but the price is the main marketing thing. That's where everyone comes in. I love the saying, like, there are 2 types of Bitcoiners: those who come for the price and liars. Like, it's like 100%.
Let's say a part of Antonopoulos maybe, and some other 0.01%, but yes.
And even...
Right, I mean, they couldn't know at that stage it would have been worth 200,000, so that's why they were interested in the price, because it was worth a few cents, and nobody could have imagined as an investment. In fact, when we had an interview with Tur, he said there were just 1 or 2 persons, one was Max Kaiser, who thought of Bitcoin as an investment. So there was a lack of vision on that side of price, but it was understandable because nobody could have imagined it on this economical proposition. Sorry to interrupt. That's what I want to say.
Thanks for the answer on Gen Z, Robin. Really interesting. I also think it's not so common having Gen Z, and I think one of the reasons, as you said, is if you don't have so much money, you didn't likely if you go university or you start working after high school. Also, you don't have so much money, so you don't ask so much. You don't question so much. Okay, which investment should I do? And this, I think, is a trigger for many millennials have. In fact, I think people will tell us we were lucky. Once higher it goes, they will tell us. For me, I think the only luck that I had, it was being in early 30 when I discovered Bitcoin 5 years. I joined at the beginning of 2017, but really then in 2020. And it was the age where you have a professional job, you start to have a career, and then you start to wonder, okay, but the money that I save, where should I put? Then you hear Bitcoin goes up, and then you get interested for money, economics, and all the rest for Bitcoin, and then it's like mind-blowing. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that the lack of hearing Bitcoin, almost everyone already had. So, like, obviously it's a luck that we are now into Bitcoin because at some point we heard about it.
Yes.
But that luck almost everyone had, and then we need to actually okay, let me take a closer look at that, and let's actually research that. And that's the part where it's no longer luck, because you actually put in the proof of work that 99% of the people didn't do.
Exactly. I think 2017, before 2017, it depends from where you work, your friends, but from 2017, the bull run of that year, everyone at least heard about Bitcoin. And now we are an age where in 2024, where you cannot ignore. I think that will be really, not even considered. Also for it's not only for us, for retails, but also financial advice or institutional investment. If they want to discuss about the portfolio 2025, we reach a point where you cannot ignore anymore.
Absolutely. And one thing maybe to add on to that, I think even Hal Finney, I think that's true actually. Hal Finney even speculated around the price of what the future valuation stuff like that is. So like even the really early OGs, they at least had it in their mind, if that whole thing is successful, that it has a big future potential financially and will pay off financially. So I think even for the OGs before like 2013, 2017,
Yes.
for them, price was also a motivator. And that's why Bitcoin works so great, because you are incentivized to contribute to the network. You're incentivized to speak about it, because your reputation will be great in 10 years. When you say like, oh, 10 years ago when Bitcoin was at $7,000, I told you, now it's 10 million. So like that kind of a thing that does make something with you. You have the reputation, and then all of a sudden also the financial incentives to do that. So Andreas Antonopoulos had that incentive. Hal Finney had the incentive. It's amazing that Satoshi Nakamoto stayed anonymous, because he knew that probably that what he creates maybe has a huge potential in the future, and removing yourself from that creation and saying, hey, I don't want credit, I don't want financial incentive, because I think he probably actually threw away his keys for the first 1 million Bitcoin just out of strategic thinking. And that's probably one of the biggest contribution to humanity ever made by someone or by a group of people. It's really good to see. And there are not a lot of people that do that now. I think he's probably one of the only that I could think of, because all the other ones put credit to their name, and with that had a financial gain. Even the people that are anonymous here, they have someone, they have a profile you can reach out to. They can make advertisement. They can make something with that. They can benefit from that. And I think Satoshi Nakamoto is probably the only one that really did contribute. I mean, there are some OGs that are in the background that just like say like, oh, I like this one. Let's throw some money in there, and they just stay in the background, but mostly not because they want to help the network without taking credit. They probably want to stay in the background to stay secure.
Okay.
So, but that still resonates with what we're saying, that the Generation Z don't have a direct interest into investment. Because they don't need that money. So I was asking to myself, how can they get interested into it? I think it's all about education at this point, because from the one end they have no need, but from the other end they can quickly change. So their personality is evolving. So there is a really different entry point, and then they seek models of trust, which now the ecosystem is expanding, so they can quickly find. Yes, maybe this podcast will help them too. There is also the thought that they try sometimes to go against the system to prove the adults wrong, so they buy crypto coins from time to time. But that's still a good thing for Bitcoin, because you need to be a bit rebel to question the system, question authority, So if that is channeled in a good way, then it can still result in them getting into Bitcoin.
Absolutely, and it's a great point. And I think for the Gen Z, maybe also parents are a little bit like they should also push it a little bit, as we see with Samantha, where the father was so early on in the education, and I think especially with the early part of Gen Zs, like under 15, I got that question, like, when should I teach my kid about Bitcoin? It's like, when should you teach a kid about money? When should you teach a kid about what to do? Like as early as possible, as early as they understand it, and maybe give them rewards in Bitcoin. If they do some dishes, send them some sats. Like that's a great way to orange pill and incentivize your kids, because they will, as soon as they have satoshis, they will watch the price of it, and they will see like, oh, like what, I got the satoshis last year for washing the dishes, and it was back then $2, and now it's like $4. You will naturally get it. once you get accustomed to Bitcoin, why it's powerful. So we just have to get in front of everyone's eyes, and at some point people will get it.
I think one difficulty is also maybe they got interest, but it's hard to have them focus it only on Bitcoin, because if you are a teenager or early 20, maybe we are boring in our not Bitcoin itself, but in what we at the end we say. At the end, buy Bitcoin and hold. And people from during teenagers say, okay, just that's it. No, I can time the market. There are 20,000 coins. So let me deep dive on that as well. So it will be also hard to hold them on Bitcoin. While that's different from boomers, because I think the boomers and Gen X and the older Gen X will stick with Bitcoin. It will be already hard for them to understand the new technology. So they will maybe likely more stick only on Bitcoin.
We see that actually where the younger generation is more into gambling altcoins. Sometimes those altcoins are also connected to games and video games and stuff like that. So that's something I'm definitely not concerned about that, to be honest, because they are playing, they're gambling, and they will grow up. They will see the real value. And I think it's great. Like if 17-year-olds get rug pulled by some meme coin when they almost have no money, that's perfect. They're learning a lesson very early on, and maybe with 20 they are Bitcoin maxis because they all of a sudden get the value of that. So I welcome that.
Yeah, it's maybe a standard path to get wrecked also with altcoins, and then like the best way, or the most common way to become a Bitcoiner is also get wrecked with altcoins after you try also with altcoins.
100%.
Yeah, and this really brings us to the point of the person who brought you into Bitcoin. You mentioned before, and you had the pleasure to interview, talking about Michael Saylor. And so he's a clear example of a person later in his life. He had all of the educational tool, MIT degree, CEO of a public company, investment expert. He also, the video about talking about Apple, he was enthusiastic about it. We see the price skyrocket. So really prepared the people, educated them, and he found a way to understand the Bitcoin and adopt it and made his life out of it. And so, talking to you, asking you to talk a bit about the experience you had during the interview. We have watched the interview, it was amazing. But being a real one-to-one, some person like you admiring him, what did you grasp off stage, in the backstage, before, after the interview? What are the teachings and the experience? How did improve your vision and your engagement with Bitcoin?
One thing I definitely got from the Mike Saylor interview, outside of the 1.5 interview that everyone can listen, is the full focus he has on Bitcoin. I think people don't grasp how much work he puts into researching, even now, how deep he cares about Bitcoin and how diligent he researched everything that is happening in Bitcoin all the time. And the only way I like the fact that he was on my podcast kind of even proves that, because he was not on the podcast because I had some weird contact to some assistant or whatever. I just was on Twitter and he followed me on Twitter. And I noticed that he is watching my Twitter since a year before even that, because he was liking some stuff and he was taking some pictures of mine and reposting them and stuff like that. So he watches not only like the 5 biggest accounts, he watches the whole community. He's really searching for all the voices in Bitcoin, and he really wants to understand the Bitcoin community, the cyber hornets as he calls it, as deeply as possible. Obviously, he has a big incentive to do that, to understand all the ins and outs of the Bitcoin community, because he bet basically all his money, all his life, all his reputation exactly onto that. So he cares deeply what people say about Bitcoin and what the narrative is around Bitcoin. He chooses his words extremely wisely. It's like I'm just going off my brain and I'm just dumping anything on the microphone. He's not that type. He's really thinking about everything he's saying. And you can tell when you listen to him that things that he says, he trained that. He really researched that. He really thought about how do I say it? How do I choose my word? He's really particular in what to say and what to not say. And it's obviously the whole thing around. People always think there's like a pre-talk with Saylor and then after talk, and then like there's a lot of contact. There's not. There's like a very. I had so less time that I even forgot to ask him about the question for the next guest because it just didn't came to that. I can tell you how it went off. I saw that he followed me on Twitter, and then I made the public tweet of like, hey, Mr. Saylor, I would love to host you on my podcast. He responded and said, yes, I would love to talk about Bitcoin. He sent me the details of his assistant. I contacted his assistant. From there on, I just I had only contact with her. And then on the day where he came, half an hour earlier, his assistant came, saw if everything is perfect. He came, sat down, asked one question, is like, how many questions do you have and what do you want to talk about? And then we pressed record. I literally talked maybe 3 sentences outside of the podcast with him. So it's just like very focused, no small talk, no fancy things before or after. It's just like, let's go, let's work, let's record. And I admire that a lot, that pure focus on what's important and what's in front of us. The level of perfection also that he cares. He really looked around in the room. Is there glass that is inside of in the view of the camera? He cut off his speaker's band, so his arm looks is not with a speaker's band. So he really cares about how it looks, and he's extremely professional. That's the only thing really I can tell you outside of the interview, because he's professional, he's very focused, he cares extremely deeply about the community, and all the other things you can see in the podcast.
Thanks for sharing.
No, yes. I mean, that's what the great people have in common. They all are focused. They don't waste time. They just go straight to the point and trying to learn also from other people. Smart people learn from other people. So that's why I follow with you, and they want to engage with you and from the whole community. Because I don't know what, even if we have a lot of billions, but you cannot control the community. So you really have to observe and see how things evolve, and then you have to tell your opinion, share your opinion if you see things going in a bad way. And I have a difficult question for you in this regard. I mean, the difficult question is the topic of the month, is the MicroStrategy stock. So that happened after the interview. I personally think it's a great tool. It's a funnel for the financial system. It's a recycling capital and funneling it to what really matters, which is Bitcoin. That's great. But my question is for you, would you keep that strategy as a financial strategy for businesses and that's it? Or do you think that also individuals should engage with the MicroStrategy stock a bit as a side investment, or it's better the individuals not to deal with it at all and just buy pure Bitcoin?
Even Michael Saylor says that you should buy Bitcoin and not MicroStrategy stock. Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that that's the best strategy. And also Michael Saylor himself sells MicroStrategy stock and buys Bitcoin. So it's the superior way of doing it. If you buy MicroStrategy stock, you can do that for a few reasons. For example, you want to support the first publicly traded company that has ever adopted Bitcoin. Maybe that's something worth for you, and you're like, hey, let's put some money on there just to support the cause, the mission. But I don't know how much support Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy needs. And the second is like you want a higher return on your Bitcoin investment. But for people it's really important to understand the risks of that, because Bitcoin is an extremely risk-off asset. You have, outside of a black swan, almost no risks. With a stock, and I'm not even talking about MicroStrategy here, I'm talking about every single stock that is available has a lot of risks. And even Michael Saylor made a great video on that. I think it's like 2 hours long, where he only talked about the risks associated with stocks, real estate. I think it was just stocks and real estate, honestly. And he talked 2 hours around the risks, what you can all do. And he really goes down the list, what can go wrong with a stock. And he always said, like, this all applies, obviously, also to MicroStrategy. So just be aware that just if you buy MicroStrategy, you get MicroStrategy and not Bitcoin. You get the MicroStrategy risks also associated with that. You get then maybe a faster number go up technology. And if you're really just here for more money and a quicker way to being rich, and are okay with all the risks, and you understand the risk, and you're like, oh, like that's good, then maybe it's a good bet for you. I don't do that, and I'm very convinced that MicroStrategy will outperform Bitcoin in the next 5 years. I'm still 100% Bitcoin self-custody and don't touch MicroStrategy. I interviewed the CEO of MicroStrategy on my no longer CEO of MicroStrategy on my podcast. I'm still only 100% in Bitcoin self-custody. Not because I don't like MicroStrategy. It's an amazing stock. I love what he's doing, obviously. But I just don't like the risks associated with that. And the additional risks that come with a company, like what is the management doing? You have to keep up with the news. And I did that before Bitcoin. Before Bitcoin, I was into stocks. And when you're into stocks, you have to keep up with the news. You have to keep up with the research. You're like, okay, how much credit does he has? Okay, if Bitcoin falls down to 7,000 again, does MicroStrategy now get problems? Yes or no? Like, what are the cash flows? What if the cash flows reduce by 50% next year because some product comes out that gets to the core of the MicroStrategy business model that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, and maybe they cannot service the debt anymore. Like, all those questions in your head that you have to ask yourself and you have to research about is something that you have to keep in mind. Obviously, it's a bet that went really good in the last months and years since Saylor adopted Bitcoin. Also, something interesting you note, the MicroStrategy was going up parabolically in 2000 in the dot-com bubble, and then obviously it fell down massively, and then it was like 20 years of like nothing, and now it went up again, and it's now actually higher than the highest point of like the dot-com bubble. So for anyone that bought MicroStrategy in 2000 on the high and kept hodling, respect, you now have like 40% or something like that in the green. That's amazing. But yeah, with every stock, I'm always saying be careful with it. I probably prefer MicroStrategy over a Bitcoin ETF. Like, if you have Bitcoin ETF or MicroStrategy, I probably prefer MicroStrategy. But I just like Bitcoin and self-custody. Like, Bitcoin is such an amazing tool. It's already going up so fast. I just want to have a place where I can save my money. I don't have to worry about that. And all the rest of my time, I can focus on making podcasts. I can focus on providing value, or be a doctor, or be a lawyer, be a teacher, be whatever you are. Spend time with your family. That's something probably I should do more of. Spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, go out in the sun, work out, take a walk, see the sunset, whatever you want to do. But Bitcoin takes away our need to be a portfolio manager. If you now are into MicroStrategy and Bitcoin mining companies and all the other things, you then are a portfolio manager again. So you want to be a portfolio manager, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. Also, if you just want to diversify your Bitcoin holdings, that's also great, especially if you have a lot of money. Like if you have, let's say, like over $1 million or like even $10 million dollars of Bitcoin, maybe it's a good idea to put something in MicroStrategy, something in Bitcoin ETFs or different self-custody solutions. Yeah, that could be a good strategy. I don't have that much money that it makes sense for me. I don't have that problem, unfortunately. But I stay away from MicroStrategy, even though I like the stock, and even though I say MicroStrategy will outperform Bitcoin over the long run.
Yes, I mean, so it's very interesting because the concept that you take back your time with Bitcoin, you don't have to monitor all the layers of risk which are on top of the stock, which is management, is the fact that the option is going to bring the liquidity necessary for the system to be kept in place. All of these are big risks. Not big, but I don't know, still risks is something you have to consume your mental energy. So you solve that problem. But it's interesting you say that you would prefer MicroStrategy over the ETF. Thinking about a pension fund, because you are implying that there is still counterparty risk in the ETF, no? So the same counterparty risk is MicroStrategy. Maybe the risk reward is more in favor of MicroStrategy given the counterparty risk. So that makes more sense. If you're forced.
Yeah, I think there is probably a little bit more risk to MicroStrategy than Bitcoin ETF, but there's way more upside to MicroStrategy than Bitcoin ETF. And why? Like, I don't care too much about the risks. I care more about the loss of freedom go up technology. So with Bitcoin, I can trade it, sell it, do whatever. With MicroStrategy, you have a stock, you have a brokerage account, and you can get banned out of that account. MicroStrategy can get confiscated. Like a lot of things can happen with that, where I just don't want to participate with that. But if I have to participate with that, I have two options: Bitcoin ETF, which is a 1x on Bitcoin. Maybe they're like leverage Bitcoin ETFs and stuff like that, but that's also a question if you really want to do that. But yeah, you then can also go ahead and have MicroStrategy. So there's obviously risk involved, and I didn't analyze the risks of a Bitcoin ETF and MicroStrategy in depth, because I don't have it, so I don't need to research that. But if I would do it, I would probably come to the conclusion that MicroStrategy carries a little bit more risks than a Bitcoin ETF, because the Bitcoin ETF doesn't have to produce cash flow to work. MicroStrategy has to produce cash flow somehow to service the debt and everything. And yeah, it's still a great I don't want to dunk on MicroStrategy hodlers. I think they have done amazing, and I think MicroStrategy is an amazing play. It's just not something that I'm willing to invest in if I have the option of investing directly in Bitcoin. If you have a savings account or retirement account, especially I think the American viewers have that usually, where they can only invest in stocks and can invest in like self-custody Bitcoin, then MicroStrategy might be amazing for a retirement account and get tax-free money out in like a few years with like a very big number go up technology. So that might be a really cool play. And MicroStrategy is a historical stock. It's a stock that we will teach. We will be probably taught in history books or finance history books about, because the bet that Michael Saylor did was so obvious and so innovational at the same time that it's so genius, and it needs a person like him to do that, a person that knows exactly how to operate in that financial market, was so long in there already. So kudos to Michael Saylor, kudos to everyone that is involved with the MicroStrategy success story. They're doing an amazing job, and I really like what they're doing. It's just not for me to invest.
I think it's good that the people have many options. They can decide according to their needs. And for Michael Saylor, I think totally agree. There will be in the history book, in the economical books, as Bitcoin soon. Also because for 4 years, barely no one followed him. He was alone in 2020. And then there are some companies now in Japan, but they are doing partially. Like his full playbook, still after 4 years, is the only company following it. So despite
100%.
Despite the drawback, going to 16K interest. So yeah, great respect.
And you said it very right. It's freedom stems from optionality, and as long as you have the freedom to get into Bitcoin self-custody, get into Bitcoin exchange on exchanges, get into Bitcoin via ETF, or get into MicroStrategy, that's what we have to preserve. That
Yes.
Every human being on earth has the freedom to choose between what vehicle do I save my money in. I choose Bitcoin self-custody. I think that's the best vehicle to do it. But you might come to a different conclusion if you do the deep research and you're like, oh, no, I want to be all in MicroStrategy, and that might be a good idea. I'm not a financial advisor. I have no clue. I just assessed all the things that I know and was like, yeah, Bitcoin self-custody. That seems to be my thing.
Great.
Yes. Yes. Not financial advice. We have to remind that. But what is interesting is that yes, there is more risk. Could be more reward. Can be useful in the pension funds. All of this stuff. So maybe let's close the topic and go to another one, which I would say, let's talk about a bit what you're doing. You are working on Bitcoin. So every day you have a podcast, you engage with different advertisements, with other wallets, the Bitcoin ecosystem. What's do you think we are at the stage where a 26 years old who has a corporate job can start a side hustle like either freelancing or part-time job for Bitcoin companies? What's the advantage, which is clearly getting early, going for it? Would you advise doing for it, or maybe waiting until the ecosystem grows to a maximum and then change to the Bitcoin job full-time? Do you advise a slow pace of involvement, or how would you deal with it given for a Gen Z person?
If you are a person that is 100% sold on Bitcoin and they are all in on Bitcoin with the financial energy, and you are 100% like, I love what Bitcoin is doing, and Bitcoin will be the biggest financial revolution of all time. Like if you are a person that believes that, but you are spending 90% of your awake time in the fiat world and working for a fiat company, that could be fine. Like that's something that is okay. But I was seeing a big discrepancy here. I was like, I put all my financial energy in here. It's the biggest financial revolution of all time. Every time I get free time, I'm talking about it. I'm so obsessed with Bitcoin that I cannot stop talking about it. Why not I try to make it my full-time thing? I didn't have a plan in February. I was like, okay, let's just try it out. I was prepared to live on my Bitcoin savings for 1.5 years. Luckily, I never had to touch my Bitcoin savings, and I could stack every month from there onwards more to my savings. But I was prepared to spend that Bitcoin savings entirely because I really wanted to be in the community. And I said that in the beginning. My whole goal since February, actually since 2023 in the beginning, where I started my Twitter channel, was to be as deeply involved in Bitcoin as humanly possible. That's why first I got every day 5 to 12 tweets out in the first year. I didn't earn a single euro with that. just you know, like in 2023, I did every day from the 1st of January till the last of December, every day 5 to 12 tweets, 5 as minimum, plus the replies. So like 5 my own tweets without quote retweets or something like that, just like my own tweets that I thought about, plus all the retweets. I think I posted the statistics. I made in 2023 an average of 57 tweets per day with all the replies and all the things. That's how I grew from 200 followers to I think 8,000 or 7,000, something like that, was what I was back then, simply with the goal of being more involved with the Bitcoin community. Then I was like, hey, I make all those tweets, but nobody knows me. Nobody knows my face. Nobody knows my voice. Nobody knows anything of me. So I have to start something a little bit deeper, a little bit more intimate. So I was like, hey, I have to go out with my own face. I have to go out with a video format. And that's how I started basically the podcast. And then I went once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week, 7 times a week, and go deeper and deeper. And then in February, I got my first sponsor with 21 Bitcoin, no longer a sponsor, but I'm deeply thankful and grateful for them giving me the signal that I can actually do that. And it was just like a short time, 3 months project and experiments of like, can we do it or not? Like, this was just from my part and from 21 Bitcoin's part, like, let's try it out if it works out. 3 months. So I didn't have any securities when I quit my job. I had like, yeah, let's an experiment of like, let's try it 3 months out. And so I quit my job in February. From March onwards, I was then completely on my own. And I just jumped into the unknown of unknowns of entrepreneurship, of content creatorship, or however you want to call it. And this was an amazing step. And coming back to my original statement of the things that can happen once you spend not 90% of your time, for me it was IT security, 90% IT security and 10% Bitcoin, but you switch that to 100% in Bitcoin. My knowledge grew rapidly. My connections grew rapidly. And now if I go to a Bitcoin conference, if I go from a hall to a toilet, at least 3 people I meet, guests or people that I worked with or people that watch my show or whatever, because I'm now getting more and more deeply connected with the Bitcoin community. So, and by the way, I love that. Absolutely. It's just an amazing place, Bitcoin conferences. I'm addicted to those. Unfortunately, they are connected with a lot of travel and stuff. But yeah, it's really cool. So that's what I'm really passionate about, being deeply involved in the Bitcoin community. And if you are that person that, also one more thing that I want to say about that, I didn't had family, I didn't had kids, I didn't had anyone that relies on my income. If I have a wife, a kid, maybe 2-3 kids, or like even like a small company or something like that, where employees count on me, that's a whole different game. I was 26, I was 25 years old actually back then. And I could just like jump into that. And if my whole income is at 0, nobody suffers except me. And that's fine. Like, I can live with my consequences. But if my income goes to 0 and then my wife and my kids have to suffer, that's something I wouldn't have done. So I'm grateful for the timing also, that I could do it and switch to Bitcoin only. And yeah, definitely I can recommend everyone to do that. But be prepared. It's not easy. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm Bitcoin only now and now money is flowing in and everything is fine. Like, it's really hard work. Like, sponsors, they are not coming to you because they love you. They're coming to you because they also want to make money with you. They want to sell something. It's business. It might seem easy. It might seem very like from an easy standpoint, like, oh, like, he was working IT security. He switched completely to Bitcoin. He never had to touch his Bitcoin savings. He has an amazing podcast. He's now known in the Bitcoin community. Oh, I can also do that. Yeah, but I worked 70 to 80 hours per week on everything. I sometimes have like 4 or 5 podcast recordings on a day, and I still have to do admin work. I still have to reply to everyone. I still have to communicate with the sponsors. I still have to edit my podcast. So it's a whole lot of work. Per hour, I still get less paid than in my fiat job. Even after that time, I still get per hour less paid, in total more, but I work now so much more. So if you look on an hourly basis, I still get less sats for my time. But it's okay, because I now have total freedom, and I now work in the most amazing industry that I always wanted to work in, and a dream came true. And I was prepared to do that over 2 years, and it went good directly. It went good in like a few months, basically, and I love the situation in which am I in. So I can recommend that to everyone. Just be aware. Nothing comes from itself. Everything is worked for, and it's like people told me how much Bitcoin Magazine pays me to speak at the Bitcoin conference. Nothing. they are nice enough to give me a ticket, but they don't give me any speaker's fee. They don't pay for my hotel. They don't pay for my travels. Like, that's all self funded. That's all things that I have to pay for. So be prepared to lose money in the first year. Be prepared to work way more than you thought. Be prepared to see your family less than you're used to. And if you're willing to do that, that's great. But coming back to a point that we made earlier, that's not necessary. Bitcoin allows us to save in Bitcoin and do what we are good in. If you are good in what you're doing and you like what you're doing, there's no need to do that for Bitcoin. There's no need to change your whole career. And I know my audience is like around 47. Let's take a 45-year-old who has 2 kids and a wife, and maybe he's the sole earner in his family. For him, it would be maybe a horrible move to now go ahead and work in Bitcoin, because he's probably used to a high living standard. In Bitcoin, money is scarce. Turns out Bitcoiners don't want to spend money on startups and on advertising and stuff like that. Like, the hurdle rate with Bitcoin is pretty good. Bitcoiners want to save money in Bitcoin and not somewhere else. So it's not. Money is not flowing around like in the shitcoin casinos, and like that's also something I want to say. Like, if I have partnered with some really big exchanges that already offered me, exchanges that everyone knows about, they offered me, I think, like 20x of the amount that I earn now. So they are there. The money seems to just like flow around and float around. But if you're like passionate in Bitcoin only, and that's your crowd, and that's your ethical standpoint, it's not like the money is just flowing around. That might be the case in like 5-10 years. That might be a future play where the whole shitcoin casino is falling down. Everything is focused on Bitcoin. Then maybe there's space there. But if you're fine with your job, you like what you're doing, you like your boss, you like your surroundings, you like your employees, you like your colleagues, just do that. Be there for your family and save in Bitcoin. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually for most people the better way. And yeah, if you don't see any danger of your 9-to-5 also dying, because I think a lot of 9-to-5 jobs are currently dying because of freelancing, remote work, AI, and all those trends. You don't have to worry about that. So the points, the many points that I want to make is do what you think is best, but obviously it pays off to be where you belong, but where you belong might not be the thing where I am right now. It's also it's with every advice, take it with a grain of salt, because it can be the right advice to the right time from the right person, but it might just not apply to yourself. So I'm really I don't want to be responsible for someone quitting his job and losing all his money because of that. I'm not a career advisor and I'm not a financial advisor.
Thanks for sharing. For me also, exactly, you make the point, same a freedom of choice, how to buy Bitcoin. There are different levels. For me, a similar situation, what you said, like I'm now end of 30s with a good career, a qualified job. I like Bitcoin. I could talk about Bitcoin anytime, like 24/7. But I like my job. I have a good salary. I can save in Bitcoin, and I can use this as a passion. That's why we are doing the podcast. Maybe now once a week, not one per day, because we don't have the time. But we can continue with the tranquility or relaxed time that we can really enjoy Bitcoin without the stress that we have to earn in Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And that's great because maybe it turns out to be great and maybe you can actually quit your job in 1-2 years because the Bitfluencer is the biggest marketing company on earth and is marketing for all the Bitcoin companies. And it's the leading podcast that you have. So like it can turn out great even though you don't quit your job. And I also started the podcast without quitting my job right away. The podcast was already running 4 months before I quit my jobs. So that's also something like just if you work like, let's say 35 hours a week on a job, you can squeeze in another 20 hours of work if you're really passionate about it and try it out. If you work 20 hours on something and there's no money showing up, then don't quit your job. Because just because you work then 40 or 50 hours per week, probably money will not show up magically all of a sudden.
Also, it depends also of the time when you choose. Like, I think you choose a good time at the beginning of the year because we have 24. I think many, they did this step at the end of 2021, thinking that it was the bull run. And 2022, 23, even if with the quality that you have or other podcasts will have, there will be not so much interest, only among Bitcoiners. The price is dictating the new joiners. So it also depends the moment when you're doing.
And in the industry is less money. It's like in the bull run, there's just more money in the industry in general. And then it's also harder to find sponsors. It's also harder to find partners and everything like that. I have... not a single sponsor that I have, I acquired. They all came to me and asked like, hey, can you be a sponsor? And I have 3x as many sponsors lining up that want to be sponsors on my podcast. But I said like, oh, I only want 3 and I already have 3. So it's a great time right now because everything is going up. We're in a bull run. That same probably goes not for 2026 if we are now in a bear market again. Maybe even now, maybe 2025 will not be the year that we predict and say like, oh, 2025 will be amazing like 2021 or 17 or 13. Maybe 2025, maybe the cycle breaks. Maybe the cycle breaks to the downside and 2025 will be going down to 28K and 2026 shoots up to 1 million. Who knows? Like nobody knows that.
Bitcoin does its things in the short term. So
yeah, for sure you cannot have even a career path, short-term mindset, same as hodling and buying. So you have to think long-term. The truth is that there is no silver bullet. If you have family, or you mentioned, but I personally think that, as you said, work 20 hours per week, do it as a side hustle. If it gets grip, then you go ahead from there, and eventually you can learn how to optimize your time and have better results. And then as you see money coming in, you can, if it's consistent over time, then you can move that. You did the leap, even if not 100%, because you were, I guess, 25 years old. So when you're really young, you can also find another thing very quickly. So there is also the age factor, which impacts the decision and the outcome. If we think about the career of the content creator in Bitcoin in 2, 3, 5 years from now, with the price rising, more institutions, and do you think that will make sense for you personally, and also for the other content creators, to shift, to make the leap of being educators? Advocates paid by institutions or by even the educational system in 10 years from now at school, or to bring more value, be more effective in the system we live in in a structured way? Do you see like that, or do you prefer to be independent content creator in the future?
So you're saying if Bitcoin will be integrated in the public school systems also?
Yes, public school system or big corporation, because there will be the market, the demand, the need of experts. We
already see that. El Salvador is doing that. It's not yet in the Western countries, but El Salvador has Mi Primero Bitcoin, and there's already from the public school system students coming there. And they're now working on, from the education department, there is then a Bitcoin department in there, in the public government system. And they're working on educating 400 teachers on Bitcoin. So the 400 teachers going to go ahead and, I don't know, educate thousands of Bitcoin students in the public school system. So in El Salvador, we already see that Bitcoin 100% will be in all the educational systems in like 20, maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years, depending on how long this whole thing takes. Can be very quick, can be very slow. I look more like at like 50, 60 years that we looked in the history books. When we think about what do we need to orange pill someone, we don't need that much. We need a few content creators that do a really good job, and we have so many great teachers in Bitcoin. When we talk about Michael Saylor, Cypher Dynamus, Parker Lewis, there are so many great people that wrote so much great, valuable stuff. If you just listen to that, read that, and consume that, we know way more about money than we ever would have learned from any publicly traded, from any public school system, about money, about life, about diet, about everything that touches life and is actually important. So we already have that. And one thing maybe to also note here is how the Bitcoin only content evolved over time. We have in 2017, maybe even like 2019, 2020, in 2020, we almost had no real Bitcoin only content spaces. They all made other things also. They talked about Bitcoin, but also Ethereum. They talked about that, but also Solana. So the Bitcoin only space has grown exponentially. Now we have several Bitcoin podcasts. We have several content creators that focus solely on Bitcoin. We have so much Bitcoin only going on now that I don't even hear about altcoins anymore. My bubble is so deep. All my guests, all my audience, all the things, like I rarely hear about any altcoin, because the Bitcoin bubble is now so big that you can just place yourself in there and you don't hear the rest. You don't hear the noise anymore. You have pure signal in the Bitcoin space. So that's great. You just have to find the right people in the beginning. You fall down the rabbit hole. You get in the Bitcoin bubble in there, and you really immerse yourself, and you have a great teaching. You have great teachers. You have a great curriculum, and that's really great. But yes, I think we will have the need to get Bitcoin, money, Austrian economics, all those things back in the public school system. There's also the chance that the public school system and how we educate kids in general is completely revolutionized. I had some guests talked about that on my podcast already. I'm not an expert on that, but I can foresee that the same way Netflix disrupted DVDs, maybe Bitcoin disrupts money, maybe also the internet and online education can disrupt the public education system. That is could very well be the case, because if you go, especially in America, I mean, it's the same thing in Europe, but in Europe, usually the taxpayers pay the fee for the university, and in America, you privately have to pay for it. You pay $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 for your education. If someone does that with an online course, they are called scammers. And if Harvard University does that, they're not called scammers. so there's some most online courses are scams, but that beside. So the information is just so free right now, and it's the information is just out there, and we can just feed off that. And we have the project. We talk a lot about Saylor right now, but Saylor Academy. It's great resources there. So I think we have to ask different questions. Like, I think not that Bitcoin will come so good in the public education system. I think the public education system will be revolutionized so that Bitcoin automatically will be a part of the new education system that we are building. However that looks, maybe it's like online academies where you have physical meetups where kids can go, but it's all also online. So someone from Argentina can go to the same school as someone from Austria, and they have local meetups in Austria and Argentina where they can exchange and help each other and the kids. Like, there are a lot of interesting ideas out there. Homeschooling is one of the biggest trends in the world right now. And it's an even bigger trend within Bitcoiners. It's almost hard to find Bitcoiners that don't send their kids to homeschool and don't do them in schooling in private. But so I think the education system in general, and I hope that answers your question, Francesco, is changing rapidly.
Yes, and the warranty we have is that they cannot ask to change the content, the value proposition of Bitcoin, because it can't be changed. So it's either black or white. You go there and pitch Bitcoin, a public education system, or a corporate, like Saylor went to Microsoft and say, that's it, that's how it is, take it or leave it. So there is no inherent risk. So I would like, there will be a shortage of educators and things. So I think it's also part of our duty to go and to satisfy the requests of the institution when they will come and they will look for experts. So I'm happy you also, as understood, have interest to do that in the future. Will be needed.
It's even. I said that recently on my podcast. I attend right now the Bitcoin University. I invite all the greatest teachers in Bitcoin to a one-on-one personal meeting, and I get a lesson from them on their popular topic, and I get educated. My knowledge about Bitcoin, life, diet, whatever, went so exponential in the last year that I can't even imagine how my knowledge will grow over the next 10 years when I just keep doing that. And the amazing thing is I get paid to go to Bitcoin University and to talk to those amazing people and guests. I made a tweet in the morning. I and then you both do a great job in that too. There's some podcast hosts that just like talk themselves and don't let the guests speak, which is really weird for me. But I just like listen to my guests and shut up because they are talking. They are the experts in whatever they are talking about. And I just sit there, relax and enjoy the show. It's not a hustle to do my podcast. It's a hustle to do all the other things like the post-production, to figure out the finances, to do the sponsors, all those things. That's a work. But the recording itself, that I can do that like 7 times a day, like 8 times a day. I don't care. I do it 12 times a day also, if I can get time to sleep.
Also, one comment on what you said on the Bitcoin bubble that is now for this cycle. I think that's physiological because we mostly come from 2017 and we needed one full cycle to get rid of getting wrecked with altcoins, and then the real Bitcoin pumps in. Those who joined in maybe 2020, 21, 22, they are still in this Bitcoin and altcoin. So after this cycle, we would move to Bitcoin. Oh, thanks for sharing. Very insightful topics. I think we are approaching the end of the podcast. One last question I have. I know Bitcoin in the short term does what it wants, But what would you think, not a financial advice, will happen next year?
I think, I mean, I talked about before already what could happen next year is also we go down and we don't think we are wrong.
Not
and
what could happen, what do you think will happen?
Yeah, I think next year is way better even than this year. So I think that from percentage-wise and also in absolute terms, the price will rise way quicker than this year. I think the news that will follow and the things that will come out will be face melting. We will probably be like what? That happened. I think the news that Donald Trump is on the Bitcoin conference will be small compared to the things that we will hear next year. So I really think that next year will be a huge game changer in Bitcoin's history. And in terms of price, because everyone wants to know where the price is going, also in the short term, if we are not above 200, 300K, I would be very surprised. And everything above that is possible. Everything, so like literally everything. It's not impossible that the US dollar is breaking down next year. I don't think that's happening, but it's not impossible. So I think it will be really interesting to see next year's developments. I'm cautiously saying that just because I talk to so many Bitcoiners that I'm so deeply ingrained in that. So I have to be careful, do not be too bullish. But I think 2025, we all should get ready, and we should really buckle up and do our best to not get distracted. Like the best advice I think for next year that I can give someone is like really stay humble. Like we know that meme of like stay humble, keep stacking sats. Like really do that. Like don't spend on any fancy things. Just keep on stacking. Don't be arrogant. Don't be a bitch about it. Because that's one thing I always said when I was in stocks. If Bitcoin's US dollar price is going up 100%, you are not 2 times as clever as before. You are still the same idiot than you were before the Bitcoin price went up. The same way of when the Bitcoin price is going down 50%, you're not dumber. You're as smart as you were before. So keep that in mind. Keep your mind humble, because things can get to you. All of a sudden, when your whole family comes to the, oh, what is the Bitcoin thing? And like, oh, how did you do that? How did you get to Bitcoin so early? That can push your ego in a bad way. And what we learned with Bitcoin is if your ego is too high, Bitcoin will humble you. And prevent that Bitcoin is humbling you, humble yourself before that. That's my what I think will next year happen, and also my advice for Bitcoiners next year.
Thanks,
yeah, and I show you
and
next year. I just want to say, next year you will have an assistant for post-production. I promise you.
Good to see. I say same. It could have anything could happen, but I see 25 the same as you. Thanks. Then I think we are at the end of the podcast. Thanks, Robin. It was great to talk to you. Was really also very insightful for your career as podcaster and how you see Bitcoin and what brought you into Bitcoin.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It was lovely.
Yes, let's do it again next cycle. Bye. Bye,
okay,
all.
bye. Have a nice one. Bye.
Thanks.